now the connection between Tehran and Qom, which are somehow close, these two cities, nobody can get there because all the ways are.
Wait a second. Come on. Don't you realize this is a rented crowd, okay? These people, they just put them on buses and they drive them around so it can appear that there are millions of people. Come on. I'm sorry. I was reading my Bibi Netanyahu talking points.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw it. It's just, because you played that clip for me. I was joking with you initially and then when you played the Bibi clip yesterday, I thought, my God, he's really trying to suggest that this is just some isolated event, but now you get 14, 20 million people in Tehran. You get is it 10 million in Qom?
Yeah.
I don't know if they've given any.
I think at least 2 to 4 million people so far.
Yeah,
I don't have the numbers right now, but they're gonna, the estimation is something like this is gonna be, at least 15 million people were confirmed in Tehran yesterday, at least. And then you go to Qom today, it's gonna be 2 to 4 million. Then they're gonna go to Iraq, to Najaf, to Karbala, which gonna be something like 4 to 5 million. The projection is that. Then coming back to Mashhad is going to be huge, Larry. When they're going to get to Mashhad, it's a huge, it was we have right now 3 provinces in that region, which used to be 1 province. It's a big, gigantic province, which was called Khorasan. And then you have a huge population there. And the prediction is something like, 9 to 10 million people would participate in Mashhad. It would be huge when they get back from Iraq.
Yeah. No,
these are all paid, and these are out because of the sandwiches, because of those sort of
No, they're being told if they don't show up, they're going to get shot by the riot police.
Yeah.
It's just as I said yesterday. This is a historic event. We've never had anything like this in history. Not, the burial of Khomeini in 1989. I don't know if they went through the same sequence of different cities, but they certainly didn't have the turnout that this does.
Yeah, it's huge for the Iranian people as well, because I have never seen such a thing happening in Iran. I've never seen. Before this, we had, in Iran, there were funerals of Soleimani, General Soleimani, which was huge, by the way. It was in Tehran, it was in Kerman, but it wasn't, this is, you cannot compare the two. And Larry, the fighting is going on right now in the Strait of Hormuz. In the last few hours, we had 3 ships being hit by, I assume, by IRGC, because they're trying to use the alternative path close to the Omani border. And at least one of them was confirmed. It was a Qatari-owned LNG tanker, Al-Raqayat, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Al-Raqayat. It was hit, and the tanker received multiple warnings from IRGC, as it was reported, but decided to ignore them and instead called the U.S. Navy for assistance. So this is the situation in the Strait of Hormuz. I think sooner or later, you mentioned sooner or later, maybe we're going to have the American response and some sort of escalations. What is your understanding of the Strait of Hormuz?
Sorry.
Have a response? Because before it was this way. Iran attacks the tanker ships and the American response, then Iranian response to Americans, retaliation. How do you find the situation in this strait right now?
It's dangerous, perilous. the U.S. would be best off just to ignore it and turn around and tell the Qataris and other people, like, stop ignoring the rules. The IRGC has set out the rules. You want to go through, submit the paperwork to them, let them know what you're doing, follow the rules. Real simple. Nobody has to get shot at. Nobody's going to face any problems. But the fact, that this is a Qatari-owned vessel, and Qatar has supposedly, been in talks with Iran. But this shows an effort, some more duplicitousness on the part of the Qataris and potentially the Saudis. So I anticipate that the U.S. may try to fly some A-10s into the area and use them. The F-35 is, I think, frankly, too fast an aircraft to do any kind of close air support, but they'll use aircraft and try to target some of the Iranian fast boats that are out there. It's unbelievable. I know there's a tanker right now. I'm looking. Some of these must not have had their AIS on. So because they're not showing up anything right now. There are three. The ship you mentioned, I don't see. So it's not there anywhere in the strait. There's some that are unidentified, just show up as satellite position tanker. But other than that, the United States could start shooting at these ships.
Yeah. There were two explosions, Larry, in Syria. We had Emmanuel Macron going for the first time. It was the Sarkozy in 2009 going. The last time they had someone from a president from France, it was 2009, Nicolas Sarkozy going to Syria. And right now, you see Macron going to Syria. And the explosions happening, and the question would be, what is that? Who's behind these sort of explosions, and why are they doing this right now with this visit of Macron? It seemed, I don't know what is your understanding, because when you see one of these countries, European countries, going to Syria, it's something new. It's not common, as I've mentioned. Last time it was 2009. Then,
well, no, I was just going to say, it's not with France. It's not out of the ordinary, given France's history with Syria, because you could make the case that for a while there was. You could also almost call it a colonial outpost of Syria, even though it had been under Turkish control up until World War I. In the aftermath of World War I, the relationship between Syria and France was probably, it was the closest of all the European countries. So I don't find Macron's presence there that unusual, but by the same token, given the history of France with Syria, I'm sure there's some group or some tribe there that's got a grudge.
Yeah. But it means that Syria is not safe for anybody. If you want to come to Syria, you're going to be exploded. You see the footages. Basically, Macron and his team was passing by the same location that was exploded, later on. And you see how these explosions were serious. These people are sending some sort of sign to the foreign leaders that you're going to come to Syria, you're not going to be safe.
Right. Well, I think Syria's had that reputation now for at least 15 years, that, again, in the civil war that was launched in Syria back in 2012, 2011, that was done by the CIA and by MI6. The West was responsible for, we were going to destabilize the country and get rid of Bashar al-Assad. He became the ultimate bad guy. And, we've got this ever-changing standard for who's good, who's bad. See, like, no, al-Shara's good. Oh, he's a good guy. Meanwhile, he was the one carrying out these kinds of bombings just, 2-3 years ago. So it's a very, to say that it's a hypocritical policy would be generous.
But you see two different sort of objectives on the part of the United States and Israel in Syria. On one side, you see Donald Trump talking about Syria is different from the way that Benjamin Netanyahu sees Syria today, or Israel sees Syria, because they want the occupation to continue. They want to, to get more land from Syria, from southern part of Syria. On the other hand, you see the pressure from Turkey happening in Syria. They say no occupation of Syria, and Syria are going to be sovereign. And then you see somehow the Syrian government, al-Shara, and these people in power in Syria, they say they don't want a new conflict with Lebanon. Syria somehow is trying to redefine its role or define its role under the new administration or under the new people in Syria. And I think as time goes by, the Turkish government is trying to reshape that or to help to form that in Syria. I don't know, how do you see the leverage that Turkey has in redefining the role of Syria in the region, not having conflict with Lebanon, and somehow close to Washington, better relationship with the West, and the occupation of Syria? I don't know, how does that feel?
I don't know if when you were growing up, if you ever watched this program in the United States called the World Wrestling Federation. Vince McMahon was behind it. And they'd put on these wrestling events. In fact, one of them featured Donald Trump in a ring with Vince McMahon fighting him. And they'd get what they call tag team matches, where every, different people would jump in and they're hitting each other over the head with chairs and standing on the ropes and jumping on each other. That's Syria. You've got the Alawite population. They're sort of let's call them Shia light. I mean, they have more in common with the Shia. You've got a Christian, or a diminishing Christian population. You have a Sunni population. You've got these tribes. You've got the Druze. You've got the Kurds. So there's no sense of national Syrian identity. And when you get all these different outside interests, Israel will support, like has worked with the Druze, support them to you. But again, Israel's not doing it out of the kindness of its heart. Like, oh, yeah, we're with those. We stand in solidarity with those people. They're doing it to achieve what Israel wants, what Israel says is in its interest. Ditto for Turkey. Erdogan is wanted to destroy the Kurds, and the Kurds have had, at least an element of the Kurds for years, have been involved with terrorist acts. In fact, after I left State Department, I got hooked up with my old boss from State, Ambassador Morris Busby. And Buzz got contacted by the government of Turkey at the time to do a study on the PKK. And so we got paid, I think, $25,000 to do this study. And then basically it was pointing out Greek support, the Greek financial support for the Kurds and for the PKK in particular, which was carrying out attacks inside of Turkey. So my only point in this is, right now there's no one defined opposition group, and the list of suspects on who did the bombing could be long.
When I said the different objectives of the United States and Israel in the region, I basically remember J.D. Vance said that what Israel wants in Iran is a Persian Libya, but that doesn't benefit us as a country. The chaos in Iran wouldn't help the United States. And so we don't want to destabilize a country. That was mentioned by J.D. Vance.
What do you mean by Persian Libya? You mean to turn Iran into what Libya was with all
Exactly.
the factional fighting?
Exactly. That was
Okay.
he meant, yeah. He said that making a new Libya in Iran. And so there are two sort of ideas right now. One of them says that stabilizing the situation in the Middle East. Syria, you've mentioned how chaotic is the case of Syria. So the question is, who wants to stabilize everything in Syria, and who wants to go against it, and who's benefiting from that?
Well, again, can you identify for me who wants to stabilize Syria?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think there is anybody that wants to, other than some Syrians who live there, and say, "Hey, we wish all this madness would stop." I mean, the jihadists, the Hayat Tahrir Hashem, Al Nusra, ISIS. That's still there. And so you still have this group that are intent on building their own caliphate. Now, is al-Shawra just a tool and to pave the way for that, or is he actually, been totally compromised by the West and now wants to serve Western interests? I don't know. You could make a case that Alawites who have been victimized by al-Shawra, that a group within there are the ones that built that bomb and planted that bomb, both to embarrass al-Shawra and maybe try to kill Macron. That would have been like a icing on the cake for him if they'd pulled that off.
Yeah. My understanding is Turkey wants to stabilize the situation in Syria. They don't want this sort of chaotic situation. That's why they're the new enemy, the worst enemy of Israel right now.
Mm-hmm.
When they're talking about Turkey turning into a new enemy, it means all about the situation in Syria. And by the way, Turkey tried to send some of these people in HTS and ISIS people, which were in Syria, foreigners, basically send them to the Central Asia or to Africa, to Sahel, if I'm not mistaken. Send some of these people to Sahel in Africa. And do you think that the United States, Turkey would be able to convince the United States to help them to somehow bring some sort of sanity to Syria?
Yeah, but how would you do that? You've got the traditional way is to say, okay, al-Shawra is our guy, so we are going to provide security assistance. We're going to provide training. So you have to start ideally, does he have a police force? Like what we do at State through the Anti-Terrorism Assistance Training Program is, we would take the police and put them, to train up a SWAT team for starters, train police to do post-blast investigations and to have a bomb squad to deal with improvised explosive devices. Now, on the military side, the military provides a broad range of training through, you'd have special forces, Green Beret units go in to work with specific units and develop, their tactics and their procedures. So, I mean, that's one way that's sort of the traditional way the United States gets involved with this, where we just start spending the money. but you know, it's a mess because you've still got the Russians present up near the border with Turkey, and they've been protecting the Alawite population. So there is, again, this is this is trying to create an artificial state. Essentially, is what I'm saying. The Syria that we knew under the Assads, that's gone. It's now very, very balkanized. It's a patchwork quilt of different, primarily different tribal groups. Number one, then followed by the different ethnic groups.
What is the alternative for Syria? The alternative would be attacking Lebanon, helping Israel, helping the United States in attack or destabilizing Lebanon.
Well, Syria doesn't have that kind of. Yeah, Syria is not Syrian. There is not a real Syrian government now. It exists on paper. He doesn't have an established bureaucratic army that is, that really has any kind of popular support. You've got some security forces that are at odds with the jihadists that were Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and now are being dressed up to pretend like they're really a legitimate security force. Yeah, that's the point. Ashar is in charge on paper, but he doesn't represent a majority of the different. He's not an individual that's going to bring all these different conflicting interests in Syria together.
Yeah, my understanding is that the Israeli agenda is to somehow make some sort of conflict between Lebanon and Syria. Then they're going to be comfortable with their occupation in the southern part of both countries, in the southern part of Lebanon and Syria, and nobody going to bother them, bug them in that region. This is the agenda on the part of Israel. That's why they hate Turkey today. They hate because they see Turkey going against that sort of agenda in Syria.
Yeah, well, they should have. I mean, that's their goal to gain. They want firm control. They've got control over the Golan Heights. They want to, create this additional buffer. And like you said, if they can get Syria, if they can get the jihadists, the Sunni jihadists fighting Hezbollah, then get better than that for them. That's where, you want to pull all these different Muslim groups aside and just smack them up the head and say, "Do you guys not realize don't you realize you're just being used?" That's it.
Larry, Donald Trump and his administration is under tremendous pressure from the Israeli lobby not to sell F-35 engines to Turkey. And Donald Trump is there in this summit, NATO summit in Turkey. And last time, it was 2015, the president of the United States visited Turkey, if I'm not mistaken. And so it's been more than 10 years last time that we had the US president in Turkey. Does that mean that the United States is redefining its policy in Turkey, vis-a-vis Turkey?
Well, you understand in English, the word Turkey has it doesn't just refer to a bird or a country. It's
Turkey.
Also, yeah, Turkey is the country.
Yeah.
But a turkey, when you say, "Hey, that's a turkey," it's English slang to say that it's something pretty weird, pretty screwed up. That there's a problem with it. And I find it ironic that the United States wants to sell the F-35s to Turkey. In other words, the F-35 is a turkey. It is right now only 30%, maybe 25% of all of the F-35s are combat ready. They are expensive to operate. They are very difficult to maintain, and they're very expensive to maintain. And you got to step back and ask yourself, why the hell would we want to do that to Turkey or Turkey? They give them a problem. And why would the Turks, why did Erdogan and his military, why would they want that piece of crap? It's not a good aircraft. It's a good aircraft if it can function, except right now, the United States cannot get the radars for it that's supposed to go in the nose cone. So, yeah, this is Israel's concern from the standpoint, they don't want Turkey to have the latest, greatest technology, but it just seems sort of odd to me that they would that the Turks would actually want that. I think it's more of a reflection of they feel if they can get that, that's a sign that the United States really likes them. And this goes to, let's call it the cultural insecurity of the Turks. They've gone from being the Ottoman Empire to, they get no respect within NATO. They're accepted in the NATO because they have such a large army, but they're not really treated like they're treated like a stepchild. Somebody's been adopted. So, and the Europeans go out of their way to make sure that Turkey knows that, hey, you're not a real part of the family. You're not, you're not a real Johnson. You're an outsider.
In my opinion, under the Trump administration, everyone in NATO is outsider. I don't see Donald Trump be that much concerned about Latvia and Lithuania or somehow these countries, if they're getting bombed by Russia. Do you think that Montenegro, let's put it, is he going to risk a war between the United States and Russia for Montenegro, for example?
Oh, no. Again, you've got within NATO are all the existing tensions, and now they're trying to see if they can even get consensus on what to do with respect to Ukraine and Russia. And what Russia has done over the past week and a half has dramatically stepped up their attacks on targets where there reportedly have been NATO officers and NATO representatives that may have been killed or wounded in some of these attacks that Russia has carried out in Kyiv.
Yeah. Larry, Turkey is the second largest army within NATO. But when it comes to the calculation, you mentioned how different is, the consideration. Within NATO, there are countries that are more important for the United States than there are countries that are less important. But after all, I see no country in NATO that would be as important as Israel for the United States. Israel, recently, they're talking about, Benjamin Netanyahu said, we want to be more independent. We don't want to be that much dependent on the military-industrial complex of the United States, not receiving any sort of aid or things of that sort. But on the other hand, you see they're pushing for the section 224, 62662. These two basically, on one side, you say we don't want anything from the United States. We want to be independent. On the other hand, the people who are supporting you, the Zionists in the United States, are bringing the Israeli military in the decision makers' room in the United States when they want to produce new arms, basically it's 224 is somehow merging the U.S. military to Israeli military. They're bringing them to the decision maker centers in the United States when it comes to the military and the production that is related to the military part of the government, and the other hand, you want to share the intelligence with Israelis. No one has this sort of ability in the world today, even within those countries who are so close to the United States, NATO countries or Five Eyes. None of them is so close to the United States the way Israel is, but they want to officialize that. What does that mean to be more independent of the United States?
It's a ridiculous fantasy. Israel is completely dependent on the United States. Without the United States, its ability to survive would be really in question. We have underwritten and financed, much of their defense industry. And, why do you think they spend so much money on their lobbies? I mean, why do they spend, tens of millions of dollars just to defeat one member of Congress? Because it is keeping congressional support, willing to appropriate money, and if necessary, commit U.S. military forces to help defend Israel. That's a priority. So this is, Israel right now is very much a creation of the United States, in my view. And they are they really remind me, and you haven't experienced this yet because your kids are young, but I'm sure you may have had some friends who, let's say that they're well off, they've got lots of money, and they get these teenagers who are, teenagers it's a rough age anyway. They're trying to become independent, but when you get a self entitlement, the sense of I'm entitled to this and I'm important, and they're real assholes is what they are. They're not, they don't think of others' needs. They think only of their own needs. They're entirely inward focused. That's Israel. What I'll call the current Zionist government. So it is, they can't, if there is an ultimate break with the United States, then I think the very survival of Israel would be in question. Because who else is going to step up and underwrite them and back them up against the world? No one.
Maybe they're banking on India.
No matter what control Israel has over Modi, what influence they have over Modi, they don't have that over the rest of India. That turns out to be a pretty toxic problem. And look at India. They went to the funeral of Ali Khamenei instead of sitting back and saying, no, we're not going to do that.
No. Netanyahu wants to talk with Donald Trump. One of the main objectives is Turkey. And what does Israel want from the United States when it comes to the Turkish government and to the role of Turkey? I'm sure today Donald Trump, he said he was next to Erdogan. He said he's one of the greatest, the most powerful leaders in the world, and the army of Turkey is amazing. They're the best, and this and that. And I would say that these are Donald Trump's sort of rhetorics. But after all, somehow
you're not suggesting that he's lying, are you? Jeez, Nima, come on, dude. Yeah. In the Navy, I was told by fellow, former sailors, they had a saying that you can't shine shit. You can polish brass, you can polish steel, but you can't polish fecal material. And I'd say that's Trump's attempt at shining shit with heaping all the praise on Turkey.
But that's not good for Israel. They're not happy with the case of the way that the United States sees Turkey. And I don't know, what do they want from the United States considering Turkey? Do they really want some sort of confrontation between the two?
Look, I still can't figure out what Israel is trying to do, because it is dependent. My understanding is a significant portion, I guess a majority of the oil that comes into the country comes from Turkey. And so what is our option? To piss on Turkey and to make threats at Turkey. It's like, why would you do that? It would seem to me that you want to be friends with the Turks, not enemies. You want to find out ways that we can get along, not ways that we can, separate ourselves. So I don't get Israel's strategy. It is again this ultra Zionist fanaticism that currently is directing and guiding the Netanyahu government is, I think, leading Israel to its own destruction.
Larry, do you see the moment that this guy, al-Shara in Syria, improving its relationship with Lebanon, with Hezbollah? Because they were talking about they don't want to go to war with Hezbollah. They want to talk. If that's necessary, they want to talk with Hezbollah. They don't want any sort of conflict. And improving the relationship between Syria and the United States, between Syria and other European countries, even with the war between the United States and Iran, they didn't say that much about the war. They didn't want to be part of anything in the region. The regional conflict I'm talking about. It's somehow showing some sort of sign that they're perceiving what's going on, and they don't want to be part of chaos. They want to somehow help their situation. And how do you see the leadership in Syria, these guys that are in power, and the way they see Hezbollah?
Well, if going back to al-Shara's roots as al-Jalani and the head of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, they saw Hezbollah as heretics that had to be destroyed, that they were in violation and contravention of God's of the will of Allah. So, now he's got a new haircut and a beard trim and a Brooks Brothers suit, and now he's changed his views. I don't think so, unless he was just a complete tool of the United States intelligence community, and that the things that he allegedly claimed to have believed, he doesn't really believe. But remember go back to the start of when the United States decided to start arming these the ISIS and to launch those attacks to destabilize the government of Bashar al-Assad back in 2011, going into 2012, that it was Assad asked Iran for help, and that was where General Soleimani entered the picture to fight against these Salafists, because while there are many in the West that like to view Islam as a monolith, that wants to impose the favorite is they want to kill all Christians and kill all Jews. I mean, I had a very good friend of mine the other day telling me this, that they want to wipe out Jews and they want to wipe out Christians. And I said,
my God,
Iran, they're allowing Jews to exist there, to live there. They're part of the government. In fact, it's mandated that they're in the parliament. how does that work? That they're trying to kill them, and yet they want them part of the government. And the same with Christians. Yeah. There's when we talked about this before, there's a prohibition on Muslims converting to Christianity, but Christians themselves are respected and allowed to worship. In fact, I think one of the main subway stations in Tehran that's outside the Armenian church is dedicated to Mary, the mother of Jesus. Which is a pretty odd thing to do for a bunch of crazed Muslims that hate Christians. So the intervention of Iran at that time, because the Iranian Shia were frequently the targets of these Salafists. The Wahhabis, Salafists, Deobandis, but they are these ultra-Orthodox, I call them ultra-Orthodox Muslims that are convinced that theirs is the only truth and that theirs is the only correct interpretation of the Quran. And therefore, anybody who falls outside of that definition must be destroyed, which is why they could kill other Muslims in violation and in exact violation of what is taught in the Quran. So that's why you step back and you watch what's going on in Syria. There's not a natural constituency of people that have come together and said, look, this is who we are. This is this is what we are as Syrians. What is it what does it mean to be a Syrian? And no, the identities are first and foremost ethnic. What does it mean to be Alawite? What does it mean to be Druze? What does it mean to be Shia? What does it mean to be Sunni? What does it mean, the Kurdish? And that's what comes first, and this other attempt to create a nationalist identity just becomes secondary.
You know what? As a Muslim, when you grow up as a Muslim, they say 5 prophets are so important, prophets of a strong resolve, as they call it. And Noah, as the first one, Noah is as they call it in Persian, Nuh. Abraham, in Persian they call it Ibrahim, and Moses, in Persian they call it Musa, and Jesus, and in Persian, in Islam they call it Isa Masih, the Messiah, Isa the Messiah, Isa Masih, and Jesus, and Muhammad. And they say, basically in Islam, they say all these 5 prophets are so important, you have to respect all of them the same, and their followers are the same. Yeah. That's basic in Islam. And you hear some sort of argument that they want to kill this and that. It's unbelievable for me to even hear that. I don't know how this propaganda is so thick, Larry, to divide people instead of bringing people together. Well,
again, and that's, that is U.S. policy is not about creating unified countries. U.S. policy is about creating a bunch of obedient whores. You do what we tell. We'll pay you money. You do what we tell you to do, and don't ask questions.
Larry, the situation in the Strait of Hormuz, I think, is one of the greatest problems that we are witnessing right now, together with Lebanon. And Israel is attacking this in the southern part of Lebanon. In the recent hours, they were attacking some parts in the southern part of Lebanon. That fortress, you remember, that they were trying to capture, it seems that they captured that fortress in the southern part of Lebanon. Al Hayat, if I'm not mistaken, the fortress. So the war is not stopping in the southern part of Lebanon.
Right.
and
Yeah, it's
I
a
don't
violation of the MOU.
a violation MOU and the MOU between Israel and Lebanon, which was the Trump administration was behind that MOU as well. So basically, the MOU means nothing so far. No achievement out of MOU. I don't know if you saw the footages in Iran. The people are totally against MOU, or not all of them, but there are people who are arguing what is the outcome of MOU so far for us. If you
Well,
were to evaluate, look at the MOU, what was achieved so far? What is practically achieved so far?
well, Iran is selling oil, and they're selling oil at a premium, and they're able to pocket that money, and they're able to get goods, items delivered via cargo container ships that previously were not daring to enter the strait because of the U.S. blockade. It wasn't so, it was the threat of the blockade, not the actual blockade. So so from that standpoint, Iran is benefiting. But do they have unfrozen assets? Not yet. They have had a lifting of sanctions with respect to oil and the banks that service it, but beyond that, they've not had the other sanctions that the UN imposed, etc. So, it's been it's a mixed bag. I think there's still right now you can make the case that Iran's better off than it was before, because it's sending out oil right and left.
Yeah. Here is what Macron said, Larry, with the meeting he had with al-Shara in Syria. France rejects all calls for Syria's partition and supports the country's unity and stability in all its components. No groups can succeed at the expense of another. I have a great respect for Syrian people who struggled for 14 years to achieve and regain their freedom. I don't know if you can call what has happened in Syria freedom, and
well, it depends on who you ask. If you ask the followers of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, they'll say, "Hey, man, we got ultimate freedom." If you ask the Alawite population, they would say the exact opposite. So the Druze, similarly, the Christians, just ask Kevork Almasian, what's been his experience and his family's experience.
The case of Ukraine is one of the main questions right now with the new summit in Turkey. And do you think Donald Trump would somehow accept the support to Ukraine, which basically means the new escalations on that front? Supporting more aid to Ukraine instead of backing down. And
yeah, I mean, it really it doesn't. I'll say it doesn't matter at this point. In other words, Europe has already embarked on a policy of confrontation with Russia. They're already openly saying they're going to war with Russia. England and France have taken efforts where they've seized Russian tankers. So there's no sign whatsoever that Europe is looking to de-escalate tensions with Russia. Just the opposite. They're looking to escalate those tensions. So, and to me, it appears that Trump's going to go along with that. But the big thing right now, the big plea for Zelensky is he needs more Patriot missiles. There aren't any. Okay? They're gone. They're used up. Forget about it. And there's, all the promises of Lockheed Martin. Oh, yeah, we're going to make 2,000 a year. Not going to happen. Not going to happen for a long time. And in any event, the Patriot missile doesn't work worth a damn. So just stop. But, Everybody continues with their own little agenda in this.
Do you think that Donald Trump would send troops, U.S. troops, to Lebanon?
No.
He said that the administration is thinking of that, sending troops to Lebanon.
Well,
I don't know what would be the agenda the last time.
Yeah, they're thinking about it. Well, good luck with that. Yeah, last time the United States did that, we got 243 dead Marines, 1983. And then you also had some Marines kidnapped, but no, they were taken hostage. So no, it's if he does that, he's doing it without any kind of political, clear policy objective in mind. It'd just be a foolish demonstration.
Does it mean that he's going to send them to replace the Israeli forces if they really want this to stop the Israeli occupation of Lebanon, and then later on, deciding little by little they can withdraw from Lebanon? Does that mean that could be one of the options in their mind?
No. Look, Israel's not going to withdraw unless the United States forces it to by withholding aid. Otherwise, Israel's going to stay there, and we've had UN peacekeeping forces trying to, intervene and get between the Hezbollah and the Israelis for good God, 43 years. So this is, and the UN peacekeeping forces are still there; they're just irrelevant.
Yeah, they're trying to do the same in Gaza. And they're trying to send people in Gaza to some sort of camps and concentration camps, and if we can call them this way. And is that going to be successful? The Biden administration tried to do that before. They were talking about it, tried to do that, but it wasn't successful. Right now, the Trump administration is trying to do the same.
Well, what do you mean successful?
Because they wanted to send the people to gather people all together in some sort of camps, in controlled camps.
Yeah, okay, so I mean, are some of the Gazans going to go to those camps and find some shelter and some protection? Yeah, I think they will. Now, but that doesn't mean that Hamas is going to surrender and that Hamas is going to be neutralized. Just the opposite.
Yeah. Thank you, Larry. And let's see what would happen in the coming hours. But the fight is happening as we talk in the Strait of Hormuz, right? Just moments ago, we've learned again, IRGC announcing, because that each and everyone who wants to use the Strait of Hormuz, they have to follow the designated routes in the Strait of Hormuz. So the fight is going on. The United States is trying to do its job there, to use the